Welcome to this video on creating coherence in a literature review. The purpose of this video is to cover some techniques to create flow and coherence in a literature review and to focus on transitional phases, phrases, and signposts. So what we're going to do is to look at 6 different techniques or devices to create coherence in a literature review. Now, what do we mean by coherence? Coherence is the flow of the paper, where we take the reader very smoothly from the first sentence all the way through to the last, where the reader's caught up in the message of the paper and not pulled out to try and work out how one paragraph connects to another. Achieving coherence is part of crafting the paper. This is what you would do in the later revision rounds. And there are many techniques to create coherence. I'm only going to go through 6 here. But perhaps it will open your eyes so that when you read, you can begin to see how authors have used these techniques to create flow in their writing. So these are the transitional devices to create coherence in a paper. We're going to look at 6. The very first one is headings. Now, I know not everybody in all disciplines like to use headings, but to me, they are a really important way of not only organizing your own self in terms of writing, but providing the reader with a sense of organization and direction. They act as signposts so that the reader can see the heading, read the signpost, and say, okay, now I know what's going to be in this section. They're a way to be kind to a reader, to take a reader very gently through a paper. But you should be able to remove all the headings and still have flow. So although the headings act as signposts, you want to have coherence in the body of your paper as well. But think about the headings, really make them work for you, because they can be incredibly useful to a reader, but also to yourself as a writer. The second device is transitional words and phrases. These are the more common linking devices. They are used as signposts to help direct a reader through a paper. And the reason why we use them is that as a writer, you know when you shift your thinking, but your reader won't know unless you provide signals. And using these transitional words and phrases, you can connect thoughts and you can sequence ideas, you can group things for the reader. So they serve the purpose of helping the reader follow a main line of thought and follow your thinking as you move from one group of thoughts to another group of thoughts, which may be in contrast to. But transitional words and phrases can be really overused and they can begin to irritate a reader. So again, you must use them sparingly and quite deliberately. So here are some examples. Some of these you'll be familiar with and you probably use already. But I just want to show you a few things. The first one I've put up there is grouping words, and I think this is a really important way to help the reader access the information that you're trying to present. By grouping them into first, second, or third, you're showing the reader how these things fit together and you're sequencing the information. So it's much easier for the reader to get through first, second, third than 2 or 3 pages. Elaboration phrases, this is where you add, make sense of things. Conclusion phrases, where you're pulling things together, consequently it follows that. Showing cause and effect, so here you telling the reader, I'm thinking about this and it results in this. Presenting contrast, countering, it's the same thing. You're saying, here's one group of ideas, however, other group of ideas think differently. Sequencing, very useful to help your reader access information. Before this happened, that happened. After this happened, that happened. Showing similarity, here you're telling your reader all these things are the same. So similarly, similar to. Linking examples, so you're explaining to the reader, I've made this point, for example, and then you show the example. Linking space and place, if you're showing processes or if you're talking contextually, these are very useful words to show the reader how things relate to one another. So those are just some examples. There are many, many more. And I'm sure you've actually come across many of these phrases. But here's one example. Theory plays an integral role in the development of a research question and research objectives. To illustrate this, we draw on Wetton, who identified 4 components of theory, namely what, how, why, and a 4th group of who, where, when. So what's interesting about this, and it just shows you how these techniques work, is the main point is the first sentence. Then the writer is talking to the reader and saying, I'm explaining this a bit further, and then grouping what's going to come next. So the paragraphs that follow will be grouped into those 4 what, where, when categories. Another device for coherence or creating coherence is repetition. And this is where you link ideas, sentences, and paragraphs by repeating words and phrases at the end of one paragraph and at the beginning of another. This is known as a hook, and it helps the reader connect between paragraphs. So at the end of one paragraph, you might say, as noted, writers must connect their paragraphs. And in the next paragraph, you begin, one way for writers to connect their paragraphs is to use hooks. So even just using the word writers or authors is a connecting device. Another technique is using pronouns, and this is where you use, but you need to be aware here of using the wrong pronoun and be sensitive to non-binary pronouns. So don't assume because a person's an academic that they will be male, and be sensitive to non-binary pronouns. So for example, Jones argued that, she emphasized, yet she overlooked. So those pronouns link the sentence together to the main point, and the reader can see exactly that all the subsequent sentences belong to Jones. Another device is parallel structures. Here the writer uses sentences or parts of sentences that have an identical structure. For example, we tackle the invisible hidden silent spaces of critique, review, and rejection. And then in the subsequent paragraphs, you might discuss the invisible, hidden, and silent spaces, and then following that, critique, review, and rejection. So the sentence sets up, the organization that's coming after that, and it creates a very a flow-like way of symmetry and flow. But again, you don't want to overuse this. You don't want to have these sentences in every single paragraph. The last technique is metaphors, and this is where you provide an idea in the mind of your reader, and it can be a way of providing a sustained flow and a way to link sections together. So for example, you could use it only in the headings. Chapter 1, the seedbed, policy ideas. Chapter 2, seedlings, policies are implemented. Chapter 3, growth, the sector develops. So you don't need to expand on the metaphor, you're just dropping it in for your reader to see how things are building. Or you could use it at the beginning of a paper and at the end of a paper or a chapter and pull it together at the end. But you really want to use metaphors quite delicately throughout the paper. They can convey messages you don't intend to convey, so you really need to choose your metaphors carefully and to make sure that they are conveying the message you want. So here are 2 examples from published papers just to illustrate what I mean by this. The first one uses music as a way to describe organization in writing. So the whole paper links organization in writing to music and how it needs to flow. And then the second paper is about the university, and they discuss the university as a game. So you can see how these metaphors they would provide this overall coherence, but they also help you understand the content. Okay, key points from this video. When you're trying to create coherence, this is in the final revision stages, really what you're doing is crafting the paper by using linking devices. These devices help to create flow across paragraphs, to organize ideas, and to show changes in your thinking and to help the reader see those changes. So they really do help the reader move smoothly through the paper. When you read articles yourself, notice the transitional devices used in the papers that you're reading, and then try some of them out in your own work. Thank you for watching this video on creating coherence in a literature review. I hope you found some techniques that you can use in your own writing.